right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stcenturywire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR. And really appreciate you guys tuning in to the Midweek Wire. Of course, just for those people who don't know, our new time for the Sunday Wire after daylight savings is here at 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. roughly UK time, and 12 till 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you're in the United States, and also all the other time zones in between there. Just a reminder, because there's been daylight savings, a lot of trickery with the clocks. So appreciate your patience ironing that situation out. But we have a really interesting program today. We'll be joined by our team members in the second half of Overdrive. Hesher, I think Ruckus, possibly Basil Valentine as well is going to be joining us on the second half to talk about a number of stories. Obviously, the Kneecap, the Irish band at Coachella Festival in the United States, made massive waves with their statements in support of the Palestinians. So we'll be talking about that in the second half as well. So look forward to that conversation, which we will have. And also we'll be covering a number of other stories internationally as well. So lo and behold, Zelensky is, this is from last year, but he is busy on the road, really making it happen for the globalists. And he's been spending a lot of time in Rome. We'll look at that situation there, what he's been up to at the Pope's funeral. That was a conclave of sorts, to put it lightly, but not really a good conclave. A very bizarre and weird and strange conclave. And like so many things that Zelensky does, this is obviously one of the most regrettable scenes in U.S. history there, with Kamala Harris, then vice president, and Nancy Pelosi, then Speaker of the House, unfurling an Azov battalion signed Ukrainian flag and then shouting nationalist slogans, Slava Ukraini, on the House floor of the House, the U.S. House. So just one of those things that we have to remind people that's how bad things have gotten in not so long ago, the most recent memory. So that's just something we'll remind you of, but it doesn't end there. Zelensky took the road show to Rome, and it is really strange. And like so many things, it always has to be about him. So wherever Zelensky goes, he really tries hard to be the center of attention. So this is just the most strange situation at the Pope's funeral. Pope Francis passed away, as you know, just after Easter Sunday, literally right after Easter Sunday. And in terms of his legacy, I mean, it's not a lot that we're going to go into here, other than, late in the game, he did condemn Israel's genocide in Gaza, and a few other comments that were mildly interesting. Unfortunately, Rome and the Vatican, the Pope as an institution, the papacy is hugely underwhelming in terms of commenting and intervening and weighing in on issues of war and peace. The excuse they usually make is that, we don't want to be political. So like wanting to save lives or stop a genocide is somehow deemed to be, quote, political. That's just one of the problems, I think, with generally in the world today. These institutions are scared to death. In the United States, the government, at the behest of the Israeli lobby, would most likely attack the Catholic Church, and under the Trump administration, certainly threaten to revoke any religious institution or church's 501c3 status if they try to condemn Israel too much. I wouldn't be surprised if that battle ever happened, should the Catholic Church get out of line with the Israeli lobby. So that's the sort of environment you have in America. And I think to a large degree that does influence what happens in Rome, the United States being the most prominent voice, if you will, in the international power structure. And so in terms of Europe, it's, as you well know, well divided amongst religious factions and so forth. So the Pope had his funeral, and talk about a circus. And we'll look at just some of the initial clips from that. I mean, the one was Trump had a sit down with Zelensky, apparently, on some side room in the Vatican, a big photo op. And this is the other thing. This is big performative political photo ops, which we'll go through some of these that are just cringeworthy, I think is an understatement. And so we'll look at one of those as well. I mean, in terms of what Trump has been up to, he is basically juggling a number of balls in the air at the moment. And so I don't know, where any of these are going to land. I'm talking about Ukraine, situation in Gaza, trying to either start or fend off a war with Iran. It's hard to tell which one's which with Trump these days. Plus, his cabinet seems to be half ready to mutiny. So I mean, and the establishment's coming after some of his cabinet members. Plus, he's picked some real doozies like Pete Hegseth, who really has no business being in there in the first place. But let's look at this situation first. I mean, this was, in a way, this was hilarious, but very telling. So again, a very staged photo op here. And this is Trump basically trying to get a sort of meeting, a sit down, if you will, with Zelensky. So he's got him in a semi-private room with, 30 people standing around, not so private. But there's two chairs there, and they're going to sit in these chairs apparently and try to discuss something important, or so it goes. Not sure. And then watch Emmanuel Macron comes in, the French president, and he's basically trying to muscle in on this meeting, and Trump just kind of shoos him away. It's hilarious. So as I was saying, it seems that Macron was hoping for a menage a trois here and didn't get it. You take a look at this clip. It's absolutely hilarious. There's Macron moving in. He really wants to be with his good close friend Zelensky, and Trump's basically saying, it's just for two. We've only got two chairs here, so you're gonna have to go away. Sent Macron away. They did get their date night, though. Zelensky did get his private meet and greet with Macron, or Macron got his date with Zelensky. So they did manage to meet in some garden somewhere under some parasol or something or rather. But I mean, the whole thing was cringeworthy. It's just one of many photo ops here, and we'll go to look at some of the other photo ops as well. But when they actually sat down, of course, Zelensky took every opportunity to sort of ham up this scene, and he did his own. He posts things constantly on social media from his funeral, and again, he's trying to make the Pope's funeral all about him. Is what Zelensky is always up to, basically. So this is this iconic photo that did the rounds. Many of you probably have already seen it, or at least you've seen the video clips. And here's the image itself. And of course, yeah, so this is on Zelensky's own X account here. And there he is in this sort of giant thing. It's like pleading to the president. So mixed reports about what they actually spoke about. But, Zelensky's obviously on a, very short timeline in terms of his expiry date as being useful to the Western powers. He's becoming more of a liability. He can still bring the cash home, though. He can still raise the money. And so here he is. And well, we'll take a look at this. This is what he wrote here. "A good meeting," said Zelensky. "We discussed a lot one-on-one, hoping for results on everything we covered. Protecting lives of our people." No, you're not. You're throwing them into the meat grinder. This guy is such a little demon. Full and unconditional ceasefire. Reliable and lasting peace that will prevent another war from breaking out. Okay, it's very symbolic meeting, has a potential to become historic. Every single photo op is potentially historic for this guy. The 10 photo ops a day with every single conceivable leader or anybody of any standing, he has to get photographed with them. So this is the ridiculous thing about Zelensky. He's talking about unconditional ceasefire. There's no such thing as an unconditional ceasefire. Okay. There's also no such thing as security guarantees. Look at this guy. There's no, when you go to war, you don't negotiate the end. There's no security guarantees. Okay. And this is one of the problems that Trump and the Americans and the Europeans just don't get. Okay. There's only terms of surrender. That's it. You've got a winner, you've got a loser. But America, Europe, Zelensky think that they can somehow negotiate a ceasefire, that they can somehow negotiate, some sort of unconditional ceasefire and like a lasting peace. No, the person who decides if there's going to be a lasting peace are the parties, which are Russia and Ukraine, and mainly Russia because they're the nuclear power. They're on the UN Security Council seat, okay, alongside the United States, China, Britain, and France. Okay, so the nuclear powers are going to decide whether there's going to be a lasting peace, not you, not Zelensky, okay, not Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine is a dysfunctional rump state. It's over. You'll never be a NATO member ever. Okay, the Europeans are only telling you that they want you to be, just to string this situation along to save face for Europe, so it's not total humiliation and collapse in public confidence in all these governments that have been using Ukraine as a cudgel against Russia. It's admitted. It's in the New York Times this past week. The U.S., Britain, or the U.S. first doing all the operation commands, okay, using Ukraine as a cudgel in a proxy war. They use the term proxy war in the American press now. We've been saying that for 3 years, obviously. That's what it was. But it took the mainstream establishment press 3 years to bring up to get the courage to call it what it actually was, or what it actually is, which is a proxy war against Russia. It's NATO's proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. I always use that full sentence because that's descriptive of the situation. And always try, you have to nail that home. NATO's proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Who are the leading NATO states? The U.S. and Britain. So this is the U.S. and British proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Okay, NATO is just window dressing for Anglo-American foreign policy and hegemony. That's it. Okay, all the other NATO, and I've been saying this for 3 years, and luckily we're starting to see some mainstream people getting the talking points right after all this time. These are all junior partners in NATO. They're relatively meaningless. Okay, in the larger scheme of things, they're just there to provide the vestigial semblance or illusion of some kind of coalition, some kind of European consensus. That's it. Nothing else. Militarily, nothing. Interoperability, it's joke. NATO interoperability is a joke. So Ukraine was NATO's strongest European military force by far, proxy force. Let's just call them NATO. And they're getting crushed by Russia. And Europe's going bankrupt in the process, and so is the United States. So meanwhile, this guy is still playing this fantasy, Zelensky. Okay. And look at how he's dressed as well. He goes to the Pope's funeral. He's wearing a black version of his little green suit. He's got that little green suit that he wears like an action figure around. He doesn't wear a proper suit, doesn't wear a tie. It's always got to be the wartime president. He's wearing these sort of funny hiking boots. Okay. Those aren't military boots. They're sort of hiking boots. His Oshkosh, Badoshkosh, black jeans, and this stupid shirt. I mean, the Pope's funeral, he doesn't even have the decency to dress properly. It's very disrespectful. So it shows you what he thinks about the Pope, or the Catholic Church, the Vatican, and it's really a middle finger to all of the other leaders, saying "F you." I'm going to show up at this major death of a major religious figure, global religious figure. I'm not even going to dress properly. I'm going to dress like like I just got this out of military surplus or the Gap. It's hard to tell which one he shops at. But anyway, Trump's not much better wearing a blue suit. Everybody was wearing black except for Trump. Now, fair marks to Donald. He actually stands out in all the photos. Maybe that was by design. It's hard to tell. I'm not sure. But anyway, fair play to Donald. He did do the right thing from a PR point of view, he really showed everybody up, sort of, and became the thing that really stuck out amongst everybody. So anyway, Macron was there, kissing up, schmoozing, trying to basically look relevant. And then the other one is when Macron, I think it was when Macron, they'll bring this up on screen as well, when Macron met Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. Now, she's kind of growing on me. I'm beginning to like her. Obviously, she's been very inconsistent on her positions and stuff like that. And I wouldn't want to get on the bad side of this woman. She looks like a real viper. If you get on her bad side, I would not want to be on her bad side. She is looks like she's got a very sharp tongue, and she's got a look that can kill. And I've seen her deploy this look against Macron. Actually, this is her meeting Zelensky. No, I'm thinking is she gave Macron the worst look. I think we covered it on one of our shows. But notice the body language here. This is Giorgia Meloni. And Zelensky's showing up, and she's just like not interested at all in what's going on. Watch this closely. This is so telling. She is not interested. She just wants to get rid of this guy. She's like, where did he come from? You know, what's he doing here? Why is he gate crashing the Pope's funeral? This is not his party. This is our country hosting this event. But again, Zelensky needs to make it about him. So let's watch this clip and watch the body language of her with Zelensky on this. It's hugely telling. She's basically like, okay, yep, get out of here. Good. Okay, away you go. Thank you. Hope we don't see you again, basically. Not very warm, not very inviting. And again, what was he doing there but lobbying for cash and lobbying for weapons? You know, basically what he does whenever he shows up in the West, he's looking for money and guns, okay? And this guy is really inches away from being completely ousted out of that situation there. And I think that's kind of all. Actually, there's one sort of bright spot in Rome, and that was the aging president of the Republic of Ireland. Okay, his name's Michael Higgins. Obviously, in the political system in a country like Ireland, the president doesn't have nearly the type of executive power that a CEO president would have in a country like the United States. But nonetheless, he still has some standing, and he commented on the situation in Israel and really came out pretty hard against this kind of anti-Semitism witch hunt, which is a hell of a thing to do at the Vatican as well. So he's obviously commenting on the situation in Gaza and Israel. And Ireland's taken a particularly strong stance in favor of the Palestinians generally. We'll talk about this band Kneecap. They're actually from West Belfast, but they identify as Irish in the Republican sense. But let's look at here Michael Higgins, because this was actually one of the more interesting things that happened at the funeral of Pope Francis here. He's making a statement to the press. We'll let you listen to this. I was very pleased that he actually spoke up and tackled this issue head on. Here he is.
You know, of course, it's very significant not only who is at the event today, but who is missing. And it's also very clear of those who have made outrageous statements that because one, as so many people in Israel now do, oppose the policies of Netanyahu, they really referring to such people as anti-Semitic was an outrage that too many in the world put up with. I think that it should have been taken on from the very, very beginning. Is that if you criticize a prime minister who is directing an army that is in breach of international humanitarian law, many other aspects of international law, if there is no respect for civilian rights in relation to women and children and such a huge proportion and so on. And remember as well also that to be free to criticize that is that the automatic other great lie, which was that because you were expressing those sentiments, you were supporting, for example, a military version of Hamas.
Okay, massively there. And obviously, he's saying, notice who wasn't there. And he's talking about Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, he wasn't given an invite, and rightfully so. That would have really been a scene if Netanyahu showed his ugly face at the funeral of the Pope, as he's wanted for war crimes with the ICC. Funny enough, Italy basically can't arrest Vladimir Putin, we found out this week, because they forgot to file. They forgot to file for the International Criminal Court for the warrant. So Putin could technically go to Italy, and there's no risk of him actually being arrested according to Italian law. We'll see if they try to, rectify that. But I thought that was an interesting development there. But interesting, Michael Higgins, very welcome, what he said there. So where's Zelensky right now? Bring this up on screen. Zelensky demands at least Israel-style support from the United States. Honestly, this guy is something special. He really is. So what's he on about there? What's he after? What does this guy want? Basically, speaking to journalists, Zelensky insisted that any future, quote, peace deal with Moscow must be backed by sustained U.S. military, financial, and political support. So again, this is beg-manding. He's begging and demanding. Begging and demanding. Beg-manding. Zelensky's beg-manding, saying that a deal has to have baked in total, in perpetuity, military, financial, and political support from the United States. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. It's easier just to get rid of you, Zelensky, than it is to abide by your ever-increasing and demanding, your begging and demanding, your ever-growing beg-manding shopping list that you're trying to secure whatever on behalf of the Nazis or whoever's basically got you like a sock puppet right now. So this is what Zelensky says. Discussions in London have focused on security guarantees from the United States. There are no security guarantees after this. Doesn't exist. The only guarantees you have is if you pledge not to join NATO. This little gremlin just doesn't get it. He continues, we hope them to be at least as robust as those provided to Israel, says Zelensky. Can you believe this guy? Additionally, we anticipate support from our European partners and are actively developing the infrastructure necessary for these guarantees. Yeah, that's a lot of fancy talk and wishful thinking on the part of the little green man from Kiev. The little green man from Kiev. That's Zelensky there. So another interesting development on this, though, and with regards to Trump, this is where things really are getting very interesting right now. We'll bring this story up. We covered this during the week, and we flagged this because it's just pivotal. This is brilliant, actually. Okay, so Trump, to his credit, I mean, Trump is ballsed up pretty much everything regarding this. He keeps flip-flopping. He might even flip-flop again on Ukraine. I would expect a couple more flip-flops from Trump. He'll probably side with Zelensky, and then he'll get preying on Zelensky, and then he'll come, back to Putin. And so it's just going to go back and forth. With Trump, there's no consistency, and he's just figuring out basically what actually is going on in this part of the world, and it might take him 6 months. Who knows? World War III could break out in the interim with Trump. This is the problem. He just doesn't. He's out of his depth, and so are all his advisors, by the way. They just won't accept the fact that Russia has won and that Russia is going to issue terms of surrender. And that's it. And that is it. Otherwise, this war is gonna roll on, and Ukraine's going to continue to be a loser. Exactly what I and my colleagues have been saying for 3 years. The longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. The less territory there's going to be for Ukraine, and the more dead Ukrainian men there are going to be. Why not, quit while you're ahead, Kiev and Europe? Quit while you're ahead. If you took the Istanbul Agreement on April 1st or 2nd, 2022, you would have got pretty much everything but Crimea, and Donbass would have been autonomous, and you would have had your whole male population intact. Sorry, guys, but you really blew it there. But the military-industrial complex did well. So here, EU leaders reject U.S. proposal to recognize Crimea. So Trump has basically said, Steve Witkoff basically got the SP from Putin in Moscow saying Crimea is not going back. Okay. Now, the international law case on this is so strong on the part of Crimea. And of course, once they joined in with the Russian Federation, that's it. So Trump's put this truth out here. This is Igor Lopatinuk commented on this. So we embedded his tweet on this. But Trump correctly basically acknowledges, the reality that Crimea is Russia now. And so they're just going crazy. Merz in Germany, all the Europeans, and they're saying, no, this is a red line. And Zelensky's saying, no, this is a red line. Well, if recognizing Crimea as part of Russia is a red line, then you're going to end up losing Odessa, Kharkiv, and the rest of it. So carry on. Russia's not going to get in your way as long as you're shooting yourself in the foot. And they love Zelensky, by the way. Russia loves Zelensky. Zelensky's going to deliver more territory from Novorossiya. More historic Russian territory will be repatriated to Russia the longer Zelensky is in office. Okay? The Russians love Zelensky and they love sanctions. That's the truth of it. So the legal case for Crimea is so strong. And a lot of people who don't know their history, like pretty much the whole Trump team, Crimea, when the Soviet Union broke up, Crimea immediately petitioned for independence and autonomy. And guess what? And they had a referendum, everything, exactly like they did after Maidan. Okay. In fact, the referendum that the Crimeans had after Maidan was identical to the referendum they had after the Iron Curtain fell. But at the behest of the West and the U.S., the Ukraine deployed special forces to Crimea to put down their independence. So the right of self-determination of Crimea was brutally put down after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Okay? We're talking about the early 1990s. And so Russia still, retained the lease on the base for the Black Sea Fleet at Sevastopol. It's the bottom tip of Crimea, but all of Crimea was still administered by Ukraine all these years against the will of the Crimean people. Okay? So when they had their referendum again, the West is lying and saying Russia invaded Crimea. They never invaded Crimea. Russia already had 20,000 plus troops in Sevastopol, plus personnel in total, I think 26,000 troops and personnel there. And when Maidan happened, basically Russia, as per their agreement, with their status of forces agreement with Kiev, they had to secure all the egress and exit roads, highways, and the airports in order to secure their base in Sevastopol, because there was instability in the country after Maidan. Okay, so it wasn't they couldn't have invaded it. They were already there. But most of the Ukrainian troops stationed in Crimea defected to the Russian Federation Army immediately. So that, plus the fact that it was an overwhelming result, So they declared independence, and then they're immediately recognized by Russia, and then they petitioned to join the Russian Federation. Of course, it's a done deal. All done legally by the books. Under international law, they have a open and shut case. Crimean independence and then cession to the Russian Federation. Much better than Kosovo or any of these other half-baked Western nation-building situations, okay? So the case for Crimea is just overwhelming. So there's no way, even if it by some miracle or some, a miracle act of God or parallel universe scenario, Zelensky or Kiev could never rule over Crimea. Even if they could, we wouldn't be able to do it because the country is virtually all Russian. And there's no way they're going to go back under the thumb of the Ukrainians having passed racist legislation against the Russian language and ethnic Russians. It's just not going to happen. Not to mention that Crimea was part of Russia previously, before it was given away by Khrushchev in like 1953 or something like that, because of the internal political machinations of the Soviet Union at the time. That's Russia, historically, and today it is, and they're never getting it back. So, but why is this an important story? And this is the important bit that you need to know. This is an important story because sanctions, pay attention, sanctions, a lot of the EU sanctions that snapped into place after 2014, after the Maidan coup that was orchestrated by the United States and the EU, okay, and NATO and George Soros, okay, after that illegal, unlawful coup of the legitimate democratically elected government in Ukraine, the sanctions that went into place when Crimea bolted from Ukraine, the sanctions against Russia, Crimea, and all the people associated with it. So they have economic general sanctions plus a whole bevy of individual sanctions. They're all tied to Crimea. Most of the EU sanctions and in the United States as well. If those sanctions, if the United States recognizes Crimea, as is the case with this, a lot of those sanctions are going to have to be lifted against Russia, many of them. Okay, that's a nightmare for the EU and for Washington. That is one of their major bolt holes for sanctions is Crimea. So Trump just saying that they're going to have to recognize Crimea as part of Russia, this is basically going to blow a massive hole in the Titanic of this proxy war against Russia. That's why this is an existential issue for European political elites. Okay? It's an existential issue. They will be finished if this comes to pass. So for Zelensky, it's a red line. For Europe, it's a red line. For the Nazis, the hard right nationalist Nazis that are basically have Zelensky hostage, for them, of course, it's a red line, even though they could never do anything with Crimea anyway. So what does this mean? This means the status quo. Nothing's going to happen with this war. It's going to be continued. The United States will continue giving aid. They'll continue providing some levels of military support, arm's length. The British will take over doing frontline operations, and they'll send in mercenaries probably, plus off the books special forces. They'll continue training what's left of the Ukrainian army in Europe and in Britain and places like that. And this thing will just gradually deteriorate, and more people are going to die. More Europeans, more British soldiers will die. Many have already, by the way. And many, worst of all, many Ukrainian conscripts are going to die needlessly. Needlessly. No reason at all. No good reason whatsoever. That's the reality of the situation. That's what's going to happen, unfortunately. And there's nothing you can do about it at this point. It's an unmitigated disaster, basically, and they want more of it. Europeans, the British, and a lot of people in America, they can't get enough of this. They want more of it. So that's the recipe for disaster, and nothing positive is going to come out of this. And the last thing I want to show you, there's so many crazy things that are happening like on a daily basis right now. And one of them is, for some unknown reason, the Israeli national security minister, who is a far-right ethno-nationalist, hardcore racist to the core, Ben Gvir himself, comes to America, goes to Brooklyn, is mauled by crowds on the street. The videos are hilarious. There's people chasing him down the streets of New York and security teams panicking. Okay. But the most humiliating part of this for America is this guy is a war criminal, and Trump invited him to Mar-a-Lago. Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir. There he is at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, this is so humiliating for the United States to have someone like this, who is, to me, not a person in good standing. Okay. This is a guy that when he's in Israel, he has to carry a handgun and he has to wave it around at people in public because a lot of Israelis hate him. Okay. This is a proper thug. And this guy is basically invited to Mar-a-Lago. We'll listen to them introducing him here. I think we've got the audio on this clip, and the things that Ben-Gvir said in his speech, it was disgusting. He's basically boasting about how brutal they are to the Palestinians. So this is the president's residency. Why would they invite street trade like Ben-Gvir and host him? Basically, you just say, not welcome, stay home. What's he doing there? And the chutzpah here is just off the charts.
The Minister of National Security of Israel is here.
Look, some people do not deserve standing ovations under any circumstances, and this is one of those people. I mean, shameful. This is the right in America. This is the equivalent of the left bringing in Zelensky for some of these god-awful scenes, which I showed you at the beginning of the program. So the right saying this is terrible for America when, they do this sort of stunt and they bring in Zelensky. And the right bring in Netanyahu. And then the right bring in Ben-Gvir, of all people. I mean, it's really something. So, but it also shows you there's a level of desperation on the Israeli side, and they're really losing the public relations war. They're losing the whole Generation Z or Generation Z. Okay, they're losing the millennials. Their credibility, the brand of Israel is a damaged brand. And it's so badly damaged, it'll never recover. Hence, Ben-Gvir comes to the United States and is chased literally down the street in New York. Okay. And then has his own mob that goes and chases women who are, protesting for Palestinian human rights, chasing a whole mob of Ben-Gvir Zionist thugs, chasing a woman, threatening to rape her on camera. And that's all across social media. Well, maybe we'll drum that up in the second half, but you can go look for yourself on X or any platform. I mean, absolutely disgusting. Why would you invite people like this to the U.S. during this time? I mean, clearly the people are so marinated, whatever side of the argument they're on, they're so marinated in their own propaganda, in their own echo chambers. Okay. That they're so detached from reality that they actually think that these people are people worth hosting. These are people of good standing. They're not. These are people who have very poor standing in society, in polite society or impolite society. They're not even worth for impolite society. These are what you would call the geopolitical equivalent of street trade. Ben Gvir. He amongst the other war criminals in Israel, unbelievable, calling for the ethnic cleansing of the native Palestinian population openly. You know, we need to force relocate them. That reminds us, that's our film on the Sunday screening, the forced people in power, forced relocation of Palestinians. That's up at 21stcenturywire.com. Just look at the Sunday screening. Great film. It's only 25 minutes. It's produced by Al Jazeera. I've been critical of Al Jazeera's Syria coverage. It's absolutely horrendous. But this was a good film on that issue. They do a good job. And the last thing I will cover before we go to break is the United States. Trump dispatched Corey Mills, and the UK as well are all saying that they're going to recognize Syria. They're gonna normalize relations with the Jolani regime. Okay, pretty crazy, but like that's basically the news. So somehow the United States is going to normalize relations with al-Qaeda and ISIS. Can you believe this? This is kind of like, this is where things are at right now. So we'll bring on one story that's related to this, but just to show you the quid pro quo, look at this. So Jolani arrested Palestinian resistance officials that have offices normally in Damascus. So you have the al-Qaeda ISIS leader here, who's a self-proclaimed president of Syria. It's a terrorist junta government that has said they have no intention of having elections. And the US and the British are sucking up to them to normalize relations. This guy was on a FBI wanted list. He had a bounty just a couple of months ago. Had a bounty, $10 million bounty on him. Had a turban, a longer beard. Look, he's trimmed the beard, put some oil in it, and put a bad suit on, and suddenly they're ready to normalize relations with this head chopper. And Israel is going to, he said he's going to normalize relations with Israel, if you can believe that. I mean, that's just a level of insanity that is pretty incredible. So this is something that Syria would never have done previously, but somehow this is back on the table. And so Israel's going to normalize relations with ISIS. That should tell you who is backing and who is behind ISIS and al-Qaeda for real. So the mask's off. Okay, there's the Times of Israel right there. Syrian leader has expressed interest in normalizing ties with Israel. Israel's occupying the Golan Heights. They took a whole swath of Syrian territory. They stole Mount Hermon. They bombed unprecedented number of airstrikes. As soon as this terrorist seized power in Damascus, Israel basically unloaded and turned all of their military bases and their ports and their entire Navy and Air Force into dust. Okay. And this guy, Jolani, who's a Saudi, he's not even Syrian, he's born in Saudi Arabia. And his new name is Ahmed al-Sharar, but he's al-Jolani, founder of al-Qaeda in Syria, deputy to al-Baghdadi of ISIS. Okay. This is a brutal terrorist executing people in public, running a sort of mad Wahhabi society at the moment in Syria. And US officials are going to shake hands with this guy. Donald Trump might shake hands with this guy at the next international summit. But not if the Iraqis have anything to say about it. That'll be interesting. But the UK is saying, oh, we're lifting sanctions now. Why? Because he arrested the Palestinian leadership. That was at the behest of Israel, and that's all that mattered. So they're going to lift sanctions. So the US, UK, Europe strangled Syria for 14 years with brutal sanctions, caused famine, hardship, starvation, just brutal to the country, to try to weaken it so that this guy could come into power. So that al-Qaeda HTS, ISIS, effectively, could somehow take over the country. That's what the West has done. They backed these terrorists for 14 years, and now they're going to normalize ties with these terrorists who have taken power and have no intention of having elections. It was never about freedom and democracy. It was never about any of that. Okay? They're slaughtering Alawites, slaughtering, torturing, kidnapping, abusing women of the Alawite religious minority sect, Christian, as well as others. They're killing this guy, killing them. And our governments are going to normalize with a junta, al-Qaeda junta that's running pogroms, and they're going to normalize. And Israel loves this. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened to Netanyahu. This terrorist handed over all the strategic territory that Israel wanted to expand their borders. That happened, folks. So pretty sad, and it would be more disgusting and sad if Trump shakes hands with this guy, or if anyone in the U.S. continues to want to normalize relations with terrorists. These are real terrorists, by the way. Not a lot of the ones that are padded out with the designation list that the U.S., the U.K., and Europe keep this bloated list of all the enemies of Israel, which they add on to the so-called proscribed terrorist list. No, al-Qaeda and ISIS, real head choppers who actually have expeditionary operations, unlike Hamas and Hezbollah, who don't operate outside of their area. Okay, Syria, different story, because that was a civil war. Hezbollah was invited in by the Syrian government to fight, guess who? ISIS, to fight Jolani. Can you believe? I mean, make it make sense, as they say. Make it make sense. And it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, we're going to go to Overdrive in just a few minutes, so we'll take a break. This is the Sunday Wire. This episode 545 of this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program. And we'll take a break right now with the music of our friends Red Rumble. And we'll be back in just a few.